Explaining the filibuster. This topic was requested by a Canadian friend of mine to explain this to people who aren't in the United States. But since U.S. citizens' grasp on civics is usually meh at best, I think it's a good video for everybody. So a little history. We ended up with the parameters for the filibuster thanks to Aaron Burr. He decided to go about giving unsolicited advice to the Senate about cleaning up their rule book. One of the rules he suggested eliminating, and the Senate listened, was the previous question rule. Previous question rule allowed senators to submit a motion to end a debate and bring a motion to immediate vote. At the time, nobody really considered the implications of a possible filibuster gridlocking the Senate, because at the time the Senate was a lot less tribal, a lot less polarized along party lines, so they got along better. And they didn't really have a whole lot to do, so if you wanted to create gridlock, they had time to just wait your shit out. So nobody really batted an eye at getting rid of the previous question rule. However, in the ramp up to the Civil War, obviously things got a lot more polarized and Senate had a lot more responsibility. So when minority senators didn't have the votes to block a bill that they didn't want passed, they started using debate to tie up voting on the bill. See, when a bill or a motion goes before the Senate, it gets debated by both sides on why it should or shouldn't pass. Which is great. We get to know where our representatives stand, and we get to hear them argue the merits of the bill one way or the other. But as long as that debate's happening, the bill or the motion can't be voted on. But without the previous question rule, nobody can submit a motion to tell them to shut the fuck up. You've talked enough, let's vote. Which meant that the minority party could tie up a bill they didn't like indefinitely, just as long as they kept debate open on it. However, this got changed under Wilson during World War I. Kind of. One of Wilson's bills to arm merchant ships got killed by 12 anti-war senators by them simply filibustering it until they gave up on trying to pass it. Wilson, an aspiring authoritarian, was never happy about being told no, so he pushed for the Senate to adopt a cloture rule. This would allow a majority of senators to vote to force an immediate vote on the motion that's being debated. But since the filibuster is really the only leverage a minority party usually has, they weren't going to be too keen on giving that up by a simple majority vote. So the compromise was that a supermajority of 2/3 of the senators needed to agree to force a vote. So this meant to kill a filibuster, the majority party needed to control at least 67 of the 100 Senate seats, which is very unlikely, or at least have some bipartisan support from the minority party to make it happen, which is much more likely. This allowed the minority party to hold on to some of their leverage of the filibuster if they so chose to do so. In 1975, this was changed to a 3/5 majority. This meant that if the majority party controlled 61 senators, which was more realistic, they didn't need any bipartisan support, and if they did need bipartisan support, they needed a lot less of it. And that's where we still are. In 2023 America, the Senate needs a 3/5 majority to end a filibuster. Now today, a Senate supermajority is a very rare thing. And our political parties are about as polarized as they've been at least since the Civil War. So the filibuster is alive and well because the minority party usually has, 49 or 50 senators. So it's rare that you're going to get your 3/5 supermajority to end a filibuster and force a vote on a motion. And the minority party can just use the filibuster to hold any motion they feel like hostage if they don't like it. And as a result, you get idiots like Ted Cruz reading Green Eggs and Ham for 21 hours on the Senate floor because he doesn't like the idea of poor people getting health care. And that is the main reason we end up with so much gridlock in Washington. Because even when one party controls the House, Senate, and the White House, the minority party can still tie up legislation for as long as they've got the stamina to hold the Senate floor. What's more is state governments really mirror the federal government. So states have their own House and Senate and, president, the governor. So many state senators can use the filibuster for state-level legislation as well. In fact, right now, a Nebraska state senator is filibustering every single piece of Nebraska state legislation, whether she agrees with it or not. She's 3 weeks into this filibuster, and she's doing it in protest over an anti-trans bill that's trying to be passed in Nebraska. So it can be used for good. It can be used just for simple obstruction to make the majority party's life miserable. And that said, as much as it can make the majority party's life miserable, it's probably not going to go anywhere because both parties realize that even when they're in power, there's a day that's coming that they won't be. So both parties can agree that neither party really wants to get rid of it, even if at the moment it sucks for them. But in a nutshell, all the filibuster is minority senators talking for as long as possible to tie up legislation they don't have the voting power to block. And that's why we can't have nice things.